Welcome everyone, Questini here with a discussion about some of the most ridiculous campaigns in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. Now, what do I mean by that? What do I define by that? Well, I'm talking about legendary lords that can conquer a vast array of territory and establish dominant empires relatively quickly and without too much opposition on the campaign map. Basically, we're talking about legendary lords that if you're playing the campaign is really difficult to lose. And even if you are going to find yourself in unfavorable situations, even if you lose certain armies, you're still going to be able to recover quite quickly and end up dominating the campaign map. And we start with Grom the Paunch and number 5. Now, Grom does have certain things that do limit his campaign. He does start in Bretonnia, and the territory that's around his capital, which by the way starts as a tier 1 capital, so there's limitations with that as well. The territory that he starts around his capital is going to limit his early game potential in quite a fairly significant way. But at the same time, Grom is such an insane tier threat that honestly, like once you get going with him, it is virtually impossible to lose a campaign. The climate situation certainly does hamper him, but this is a guy that is a greenskin legendary lord that has such a significant amount of faction power. Not legendary lord power, but faction power, that actually losing a campaign is downright impossible in a significant number of ways, despite the unfavorable starting position. To give you an idea, you start surrounded by factions like the Bretonians, the Empire, the Dwarves, etc., that are going to be very hostile to you from the very beginning, because they have a minus 100 aversion. But Grom doesn't care. Like, look at this campaign. I played this campaign unmodded for 20 turns. Yes, I do have a bunch of mods enabled in this video, but I didn't use them for this campaign. And it's gotten to such a ridiculous level of strength that very few other legendary lords can match. And this is just with like using goblin archers for most of it and some nasty skulkers to beat up Nakari, beat up other legendary lords in a campaign, gain a significant amount of territory. But what makes Grom so very strong, beyond just the sheer insanity of the greenskins? The greenskins are really powerful because the greenskins get a lot of money through looting and sacking settlements. So even though right here in this campaign I'm losing almost 9,000 per turn, and it's soon going to be 10,000 once I finish recruiting an army, and like and I do have like an entire army here with heroes marching to the front line, though I did forget to get Giant River Troll Hag. Even though I have an entire army and I'm recruiting another army over here, the chances of me actually running out of money in this campaign are effectively 0. The reason is, yeah, greenskins gain a lot of post-battle loot, so any settlement that I'm taking over, looting and occupying, which can result in you taking the settlement as the same tier level that it was before, or just sacking settlement and taking over, will give you such a ridiculous sum of money that basically that 10,000 income, as long as I fight one battle, I am not going to go bankrupt. And I'm not just going to fight one battle, because you can see here, I've got 2 armies over here, turn 20, 2 armies over here. I've got 2 more armies, or 1 more army, and a second one coming on the way. So I've got 6 armies. That means, realistically, I could potentially fight 6 battles that would more than recoup the costs that I'm spending to recruit units, get buildings, etc., etc. The greenskins excel in this playstyle of just building up a large number of armies, sacking a lot of settlements, and rebuilding those settlements from scratch. Now, what makes Grom more ridiculous is his cooking mechanic. So what his cooking mechanic does is give him a significant amount of faction-wide benefits. You can get even more cooking slots than the ones I have if you do various challenges in a campaign. So for instance, here in this campaign, I didn't even fight this quest battle, which I honestly should at this point. But is that ridiculous? The ones you'll have from the start will give you growth and will give you ocean clams. Now, ocean clams will give you 10% campaign casualty replenishment. Then you'll have 10% more from the research tree. So we have healing mushrooms that give you 10%, and then Grom also starts with the Giant Rever Troll Hag, and his DLC also contains them, and that's a significant amount of casualty replenishment. So you can fight battles, brutal battles, that will result in a ton of casualties, and you can recover from those battles rather quickly and efficiently in a way very few other legendary lords can. That is what makes Grom so incredibly powerful, because there's so many powerful benefits that he can get access to in a campaign. He literally can print money with ocean clams that he'll start with pretty much in a campaign. Or he can increase the income from all buildings, get a significant amount of control, and never have to face rebellions, get income from raidings, get physical resistance for goblins. There's a huge power potential. The only limiting factors are climate and the fact that his neighbors hate him, because greenskins suffer from a significant amount of aversion, minus 100, from a lot of the Order factions that do exist in the game. And Elfarian in particular utterly despises you in his campaign, just because he has a minus 80 on top of that minus 100 aversion. So you're going to have a lot of issues in terms of foes to fight, but basically Grom is one of those legendary lords that can fight everyone at once and he will not lose. Because even if you get thrown back to your last territory, even if I were to lose every army over here, as long as I can keep the massive Oracle, there is no chance of me getting thrown out of here. Even if all of Athalor, Bretonnia, and the Empire were to unite to try and march on the settlement, it would take armies the scale of the Order Tide in Warhammer 2, the endgame armies of the Order Tide, to be able to push me out. And that's how powerful Grom is in his campaign. At number 4 is Alariel the Radiant, the Ever Queen of Ulthuan, and she actually is just as ridiculous, actually more ridiculous than Grom is. This is a turn 28 campaign. I think the results of it speak for themselves. By the way, this is on Legendary. The only real challenge that you'll face in this campaign is taking the Phoenix Gate and dealing with Nakari trying to retake it. That's pretty much it. Everything else is... well, to say it's a cakewalk would be an understatement of the word, wouldn't it? Like, this is an absurd level of power. Now, while I don't have quite as much armies as Grom does, at least I am in a positive income situation. Now, here's what makes Alariel so powerful. She gets a benefit to diplomacy via the Influence at Court system faction-wide, because with Influence at Court, you can manipulate diplomacy in your favor to get the results that you do want. And in this particular case, I think I would probably want to wipe out Estancia to take her territory for myself. Or maybe not. But still, there is a significant amount of power you do have from a diplomatic standpoint. It means that you can even go to factions that hate you, and with enough influence you can make them like you, if you so desire. The thing is, the High Elves can be liked by a lot of factions. The only factions that obviously despise them are the Dark Elves and, well, factions of Disorder. But even the Disorder factions, like minus 25 aversion with Kemmler, for instance, or the Vampire Counts, is really a bad situation to be dealing with during the course of a campaign. And hell, even the Demons, think on this, the Demons have only a minus 40 aversion against you. That is a pretty absurd situation to be dealing with. Like, yeah, Warriors of Chaos are in a more reasonable situation to deal with. So she's a diplomatic powerhouse, and she is a diplomatic powerhouse in other ways as well, because she's a diplomatic powerhouse because of her handmaidens as well. Like, so over here I have 3 armies, and I've got 4 handmaidens between them. And I just confederated Tyrion, so that means I'll be able to get even more handmaidens in this campaign once I sort all of that out. Is a pretty absurd situation, the potential. Now, pulling this off is certainly very tricky, and you might be going bankrupt a couple of times, but damn, when you pull it off, it is enormously significant. And a significant amount of power that you do get access to in a campaign as a result of it. Now, What makes Alariel so powerful for a High Elf Lord? More powerful than Tyrion, more powerful than all the others in terms of a long campaign. Though early on, she probably has the slowest early game of all of them, but what makes her so incredibly powerful in the early game are those handmaidens. She does get a lot of them through her faction effects and lord effects, but she also has the handmaidens gallantry. Now, you won't necessarily need a lot of these early on, but you can get a lot of these later on. And these are tier 3. You can put these in minor settlements. Like, for instance, I probably would put one over here in Evershield to get handmaiden capacity. Now, each of these increases handmaiden capacity by 1. Now, what do handmaidens do? Because it's really the core of what makes Alariel so powerful. Because remember, she can get them at tier 3. Everyone else can only get them at tier 4. But what makes handmaidens so incredibly powerful? It's this skill line right here. So you get diplomatic relations with all factions plus 2. You get 1 influence per turn. You get income from trade tariffs. So you get diplomatic benefit, you get diplomatic benefit, you get trade benefit. So it starts stacking up. You get more trade partners. You get more income from that trade, you can become really powerful. And on top of that, even if you don't go for the skill line, instead focus on the combat effects, which would not be recommended, you still get favored Avisha with every handmaiden. Handmaidens aren't the best in combat, but on a campaign map, this 1 control in all provinces would be very significant. But remember, every handmaiden's 1 control and 2 diplomatic relations, and 1 influence. And Alariel can get them easier than anyone else. She gets 2 capacity for them, and she has a special skill line in her campaign as well that she can go for. You can go with either Tradition Dictates or Blood and Fire. Never go with Blood and Fire. It is not worth it compared to what you're going to get for Tradition Dictates. Tradition Dictates is a 5% economic benefit faction-wide and a 2 control benefit faction-wide. You get 15 diplomatic relations with High Elves. You get construction cost minus 10% in the local province. You get 2 handmaiden capacity, and you remember you will start with 1 because you always have 1 hero capacity. So you have 5 handmaiden capacity that you get for faction effects and the skill line, and you also you can also recruit them faction wide, and you get plus 2 hero recruit rank. That makes her incredibly bloody potent. So you recruit them at rank 3. You recruit them. You recruit more of them. You may not even need the building to get them early on in the campaign. It might still be beneficial. Now, on top of that, she gets the Defender of Ulthuan. Now, the Defender of Ulthuan stands as a massive negative, at least until you take the Phoenix Gate. Basically, keeping everyone else except the High Elves out of Ulthuan is very much important in her campaign. But once you take the Phoenix Gate, like, you'll start with a massive downside, but once you take the Phoenix Gate, it will become basically irrelevant. But once you unify all of Ulthuan under your control, you start getting diplomatic relations, you start getting control, growth, income from all buildings, and leadership. So you're growing your settlements faster, you've got the stronger economy. And keep in mind, this is like I just recently took over all of Ulthuan, so this is going to take some time to build up. And what's so ridiculous about Alariel in this campaign isn't the fact that she gets such enormous benefits. It's that she has easy access to the Sword of Khaine. Now, the Sword of Khaine is a really powerful ability in combat, of course. But the downside of the Sword of Khaine is it affects your diplomatic relations and it affects your control. Well, guess who has the ability of completely negating the negative effects of the Sword of Khaine? Alariel. Now, she has the easiest access to get to it. She can nullify its effects, and since she's a high elf, she can just build this element. Like, one of the things, like Nakari, like if you're playing Nakari to get the Sword of Khaine, it would obviously affect you in a negative way, but to get a Sword of Khaine, you probably would have to wait for a Scourge of Khaine to pick it up, or for Alariel to take the Shrine of Khaine, build it up to tier 3 settlement and get the sword, and then you just pick them up. And this applies to others as well, like outside of High Elves and Dark Elves. But as Alariel, you can just build a building and get in yourself. The only downside is you actually have to move her army to do so. That is the only downside in that entire situation. But once you do so, like, you become nigh on unstoppable. And with the addition of Mother Estankia over here in the Forest of Arnheim, you have a legendary lord that now may actually manage to defeat Morathi. And even if Morathi defeats her, you don't give a shit, because all of this territory that Morathi has is an incredibly good territory that you can take for yourself. And so you end up dominating across the campaign map with a really powerful item that you can solo armies with, and everyone will love you. Every faction, like even factions that have a minus 100 aversion, well, you just need 25 handmaidens. You can get a heck of a lot more than 25 handmaidens in a campaign as Alarielle. The downsides in her campaign, she doesn't necessarily have the best climate, though she can take magical forest, so you can actually go conquer all of Lorem if you so desire. But she doesn't necessarily have the best climate in a campaign, and her early game is slow, one of the slowest of the high elves. I'd say only Teclis has a worse situation in the early game than she does, and Teclis is honestly not worth playing as a campaign, which is a bit of a shame. But once you get going as Alarielle, like, you just take this element, you build a second army, you leave it in the Phoenix Gate, then you go conquer Safri, and thankfully with this patch you no longer have to race Tyrion for it. And then you try and deal with Noctilus one way or another. Maybe if the Greenskins here are still in control of this element by the time you arrive, you sell this territory to Elfarion to build an alliance with him, you take out Noctilus with her army while doing things to keep Noctilus at bay, and then you go along the coast, like either from the west or the east, or build a second army to, do both things at the same time. Like, one of the things I did in this campaign, like, the Scourge of Khaine eventually came for the Phoenix Gate again, so I just sent my second army to defeat them, and then, just pincered Nakari, and that was pretty much it. And then I was able to take Terranok and confederate Tyrion in this campaign and become really powerful. And by the way, Tyrion had a lot more armies. I just disbanded them because I was going bankrupt trying to maintain those armies. So it is a lot of power in a campaign that you do have access to. And number 3, it is Morathi. Now, I know a lot of people don't necessarily like the Dark Elves the way they are in Warhammer 3, especially people who play them a lot in Warhammer 2. But I gotta say, Morathi is insane as a threat level in a campaign. Now, when she's played by the AI, she would become a threat most of the time, though now with Mother Stankia, it is quite possible that Mother Stankia may beat Morathi in a campaign. It can go either way, depends on the randomization of action potential. But in the hands of the player, Morathi and the Dark Elves are insane. Now, let's go over the details as to why that is. One of the things that's quite important in a lot of campaigns is diplomacy, and crucially, aversion. Well, here's the thing about the Dark Elves. With the exception of the High Elves, the Dark Elves are in a fairly good position diplomatically. They can make a bunch of deals with a wide variety of factions and make that diplomacy work. Be it factions of order or disorder. It doesn't matter if we're talking about chaos or we're talking about the Empire. The major exception in that is with the High Elves. But even with the High Elves, there is a way to make it work by capturing the Flame of Asuryan, and that would give you 100 diplomatic relations with the High Elves. So while you may have to defeat Tyrion, you don't actually have to slaughter any other High Elven faction. Well, you do for your long campaign victory conditions, but still, all the same. You don't need, by the way, to deal with the long campaign victory conditions, and it's not necessarily going to be worth it. Like the short campaign, yes. The long campaign, it would be an interesting campaign to just capture the Shrine of Asuryan and then get a peace treaty Tyrion and just become best friends with every High Elven faction. Because that would nullify every bit of aversion that Tyrion and other High Elven factions would feel towards you. Now, another benefit to the High Elves in general is that while their climate situation isn't necessarily the best in the world, they typically can take over the Chaos Wasteland. That can be important because, well, there's a lot of chaotic wasteland. So if you're playing a Morathi campaign, for instance, you can take all the territory that's basically in this entire area, go north, and just not stop until you reach Cathay. While you won't be able to effectively take over the Empire or anything over here in this particular area, there's still a significant amount of potential that this gives you in a campaign. More focused on the north than anything else, but still the potential of a campaign certainly is there. And that's the climate Morathi has to deal with, not necessarily the climate others may have to deal with during the course of their campaigns. But still, a good amount of potential that is available. I think Lokir or Karf might have the best climate suitability. That doesn't mean they're the best Legendary Lords. Now, another thing with the Dark Elves is that they have the ability of recruiting a significant number of heroes. How many heroes? Well, you can increase the hero capacity of masters at tier 2, sorceresses at tier 3, in the case of Morathi, Death Hags at tier 3, from a control building, which is always useful to have. The only thing you're going to struggle, and this is specific to a Morathi campaign, is increasing Khainite Assassin capacity, but Khainite Assassins are too important. Sorceresses, Masters, and Death Hags are far more important as heroes. On top of that, they get instant construction using the slave mechanic. So there's a significant amount of power, and yes, I do genuinely believe the Dark Elves are far, far stronger in Warhammer 3 than they were in Warhammer 2. Now, don't ask me about why there's so many negative slaves. It's a UI issue over there. So basically, you can just, instant construction, get 2 masters, and that's on turn 1. This is something that Morathi can do. And it's not just Morathi, others can do it as well, but Morathi certainly is in one of the better positions on the campaign map. By the way, that initial battle, you should always fight manually if you're playing on Legendary very hard, because you'll take significant casualties otherwise. But fun fact, these 2 battles, or one of these 2 battles over here, might be the only 2 battles you actually have to end up fighting in a campaign. There are a couple, of course, dealing with Tyrion and all that, but that is power. Now, you get instant construction, which is always significant. You get the ability of getting black arcs. The moment you get the slave building and 800 slaves, you can get the black arc, in which you can recruit units for a minus 50% upkeep, and they allow you to recruit black arc corsairs. And black arcs can also attack naval settlements. Guess what all of the vast majority of Wolf 1 is made up of? Port settlements. And even if you have to go inland, you can always recruit a lord from the settlement you just capture on the coast or the black arc itself to go inland. So a significant amount of power with the Dark Elves. Now, here's what makes Morathi crazy. She gets Slaaneshi Corruption. Now, this gives you a control benefit, a slave benefit, and an income from slaves benefit, and also enables attrition for non-chaos worshipping armies, which virtually everyone else that you might be fighting in a campaign will be made out of. But because you can get along with the vast majority of races in the game, you have a diplomatic power that very few other factions can achieve. You have a lot of campaign flexibility. It kind of got ridiculous when I was playing a Morathi campaign. This was before they added the construction change. And I just conquered half the freaking world, I allied half the world, and I think I conquered a good quarter of it by turn 60 or something like that. Basically, I had the vast majority of Nagrand under my control, and vast majority, if not all of Wolf 1 under my control, and I was pushing into Norska. That's how ridiculous it can be. You have the choice, do you want to ally Mazamundi, or do you want to go with Yanbo and potentially screw up Mazamundi and give that territory to Yanbo, or just take it for herself and deal with the unfavorable climate. Now, another thing that makes Morathi powerful beyond the racial potential and her corruption potential, as well as her starting position, is she also gets a couple of things that are incredibly powerful. So, one of the things she can do is increase the hero crew rank for Khainite Assassins, as well as a couple of other benefits here. But the real benefit comes from Tenacious. This will give you more slaves, post-battle casualties, income from post-battle loot, which is already pretty high for the Dark Elves, and importantly, it will give you more Slaaneshi Corruption. The diplomatic benefit with Norska and Beastmen, well, those can be nice, but you don't really need them. And that minus 30% upkeep for Morathi's army, and minus 50% casualties from all attrition. That means that when you're going into the Chaos Wasteland, you're not taking as much attrition. Morathi also gets the ability of recruiting sorceresses faction-wide. While sorceresses are not handmaidens, the ability of recruiting magic users, especially because the lords you want to have leading your armies are dreadlords, specifically the sword and shield variant. The reason you want to get dreadlords is because they can get the black dragon, which is very significant in battle, so there's a good amount of power, and you want to rely on your heroes for magic, which is different than the high elves, who may struggle to increase their hero capacity for mages. But regardless of how you cut it, there's a huge amount of power in this campaign. It's the ability of recruiting a lot of units in Black Arcs. It's the upkeep benefit that Morathi does have. It's the sorceress benefit. It's the diplomatic potential. It's the starting position. Because, What you do in this campaign right now is like you take the Titan Peaks and then you can either send Morafi's army east to deal with the Stankia, conquer the Bleak Coast, and then get the Black Ark over there to start recruiting an army to invade Ulfheim, and move Morafi's army to the north, while a secondary army takes Ashen Coast, which is very doable, so you get 2 armies. It is costly, to be sure, but it is perfectly doable to do it. And because you're a diplomatic powerhouse, you can gain a lot of money through diplomacy. You might even take Skeggi and sell it to Mazdamundi before you deal with the Stankia, or even kill Mazdamundi himself and give that toll to Jan Bo, if you so decide. So lots of potential in this campaign, lots of power, and you can achieve a lot of things very, very quickly. The Dark Elves, the High Elves are a race that gets stronger as you play them. The Dark Elves start out strong. They don't gain as much capability in the long campaign as the High Elves do, but that early game potential is ridiculous. Because you can capture a lot of land, you can get the steamroller going, and very few things will be able to stop you. And Morafi is just in a prime position. It's really the faction position, the starting position that really helps her out, as well as her Selenishi corruption benefits. And number 2 is GRIMGOR. Now, GRIMGOR, like Grom, is a Greenskin Legendary Lord, so he can benefit a great deal from early game aggression. What separates GRIMGOR from Grom is that while he doesn't have the cooking mechanic and the significant amount of power that it gives Grom in his campaign, he has a much better campaign dynamic. Keep in mind, this is turn 25. While this is absolutely insane, this is still a campaign on Legendary. In fact, this is probably only possible on Legendary by using diplomacy, taking advantage of all the AI cheats against them, because the AI cheating, getting settlements to high tier, means you can sack those settlements and take them over for yourself. What makes GRIMGOR ridiculous in comparison to Grom, or far more ridiculous than Grom, is the fact that one of the problems Grom has in his campaign is that much of his early game is going to be stuck dealing with like just goblins and nasty skulkers. GRIMGOR does not have this issue because he can take Zarnagrun very early on. And when I say taking Zarnagrun, then you might even take it as tier 5. I got unlucky here. It's a bit of a roll of the dice in terms of like occupying settlements. Like you can take them on the same level as they were. But here's the thing about that. GRIMGOR can take Zarnagrun. That means he can get all heroes from very early on in a campaign. He can get basically the entirety or the vast majority of the Greenskin roster from very early on in his campaign, and he still has the same benefits that any Greenskin Lord can. So Grom might be swaddling with goblins all the way in Wolf 1. GRIMGOR has a bit more substantial forces. Not necessarily this one, but yeah, Arachnaroks, Nasty Skulkers, Night Goblins, more Arachnaroks and Night Goblins over here. GRIMGOR himself with the heroes, with the hero types, almost all the hero types, and then a reinforcement army. Like, imagine having to fight GRIMGOR and having to fight this army, which is already powerful enough, and then after that, even if the AI was able to magically win, this is what's in the follow-up. And I kind of screwed up over here because I forgot to get heroes for that army, but no problem. It's like just getting a lot of heroes is no issue whatsoever. Need more shamans though. But that is absurd. Now, here's how this works. You start in the Eagle areas, right? And you can take Zarnagrun very early on in the campaign. And when I say take it, I'm not talking about like, ooh, cheesing like the crap behavior in sieges with stock or, reinforcement locations. No, I don't use those. Like, I hate using those. I think like there are things which you can call like taking advantage of the AI stupidity, and then there's just blatantly exploiting the game and destroying any purpose. But GRIMGOR is so powerful that he can genuinely win against the armies of the Zarnagrun. That's 2 tier 5 armies in the settlement or in this nearby area, and the settlement garrison. Now, how you do it is you build 2 armies over here, one with GRIMGOR and a lot of goblin archers, the other one you start getting nasty skulkers for, and you put that army, one of the armies over here in camp stance, the other one in an ambush stance with GRIMGOR, and it's like you'll draw the defenders out of Zarnagrun, and since they think themselves so mighty and powerful, they'll actually attack you over here in Black Fang. But since they're led by a crap lord, you're going to be able to annihilate them. Even if they weren't led by a crap lord, you'll still annihilate them. And then, well, the world is yours. Another advantage that GRIMGOR has in comparison to Grom is that, well, certainly a lot of factions do hate him. It's not necessarily the factions next to him. See, Cafe, for whatever reason, well, yeah, Zhao Ming hates the fact that I've been annihilating the ogres. He's a big fan of them. Cafe only has a minus 40 aversion, so you can actually make that work. So you can potentially make that work from a diplomatic standpoint. Or you can burn Cafe to the ground. That is your prerogative if you so desire, because, like, nothing is going to stop you. Like, look at this situation, right? So I've got two entire armies over here about to bear down on Kugaf and Gorse, who've been busily fighting each other. I've got a third army over here. I'm building another army, a fourth army in Zarnagrund, which I'm going to fill up with Night Goblins, Nasty Skulkers, and Arachnarok and Stone Trolls. And then I've got two stacks over here in the north that are just, well, they're kind of just pulling Port Trog. And while I'm certainly losing money, my economy is in a bit of a precarious position, it is still substantial. Another benefit of GRIMGOR's early game situation is the fact that he can get something that will help him out in an enormous way. The Stunty Trophy, the biggest Stunty Trophy. Like, you'll get a lot of money for taking Zarnagrund, you'll take a powerful capital, but what makes it incredible is the fact that you're also gaining that trophy. And yeah, you will have a WA for a long time in this campaign, which is also a pretty substantial benefit. And it's like the only challenge potentially in this campaign, like, could, you know, Zaytan could be a bit of a challenge, to be sure, but he's not really likely to attack you. Kolic might attack you, but really, again, it's not one of those guaranteed situations. Besides, you can beat the crap out of both of them. It's no problem. You just don't want to go into the Chaos Waste. Well, you kind of do with Zaytan because he does have a pretty goddamn good landmark. Yeah, you know how people talk about the Skarsnik having a powerful landmark? You can get a minus 15% upkeep for goblin units. I wouldn't necessarily rush for that, to be honest, but it can be a pretty damn sweet benefit to have in any particular campaign, though you do need to take out Zaytan's capital. So a ridiculous level of power in this campaign that very few other legendary lords can match. And the climate situation is also suitable. While you don't really have a huge amount of climates, you have Darklands, mountains, and frozen. So you can genuinely, like, one of the things you could even do as GRIMGOR is go on a world tour. Like, just go for it. Like, take GRIMGOR's army and instead of stop and just annihilate everything in your path, then get on a boat and then, yeah, go to the Ice Tooth Mountains, take out Belagor, and then show up in Nagaroth to, well, wipe out everyone over there, because nothing is going to be able to stop you. And while your secondary armies just conquer the entirety of the goddamn south, if you want to do so at the same time. Like, over here, it is a slugfest. Drazov tried to take me out in Zarnagrund. It didn't end so well for him, so it's like he lost a lot of troops multiple times. Actually, both Imrik and Drazov, like, you're such a biblical threat that a lot of people will ally against you, and it's like they'll try and stop you, and they will fail to actually stop you. That is the monolith that is GRIMGOR. And finally, at number 1, it is Archaon, the ever-chosen of the Warriors of Chaos. Well, to be quite frank, all of the Warriors of Chaos could fit this list one way or another, because they are all ridiculously strong and unstoppable on the campaign map, and quite capable of dominating a significant amount of territory on said map without any kind of resistance. But what makes Archaon so incredibly powerful? Well, one of the things that makes Archaon so incredibly powerful is, like, one of the things that Spiffing Brit revealed in his video. Though Creative Assembly has since fixed that exploit. Basically, it was quite possible, if you were playing the Warriors of Chaos, to gain every bit of the map in terms of vassals about, like, turn 30 or something along those lines. You just needed to get vision with them by exploiting things. But it is now, it is not possible anymore to exploit that situation. Basically, you would be looking to take advantage of breaking agreements with your vassals, military access, that's just not workable anymore. That said, it doesn't matter. That was certainly an exploit. But Chaos, Warriors of Chaos, are just absurd and have been absurd since day one. Because they can vassalize other factions. So for instance, over here, if you're playing Archaon, you do start a war with this faction of Slaanesh. So one of the things you can do is, as you're advancing, you can take their territory, and then once you've taken their territory, and you get them to their last settlement, you can then subjugate them. And with that, you will gain them as a forced vassal. You can also vassalize through diplomacy. So if you take certain territories and trade them to another faction, you can also use that for the sake of vassalization. So that is the power of the Warriors of Chaos. Their vassals might lose battles and settlements, but the dark fortresses that they have under their control are also some of the most defensible settlements in the entire game. It's partly because of the layout, partly because the garrison, like, Warriors of Chaos are just very strong, and while sure, Marauders aren't that great, but like looking at just the baseline garrison, like you go into tier 3, you're starting to look at like more and more Chaos Warriors, and then, you know, as you progress over there, basically like even the baseline garrison without any kind of extra garrison unit, it's something that very few factions could be able to overcome. Okay, so that's Warriors of Chaos in general, but what makes Archaon so incredibly powerful? Well, for starters, he can confederate all the other legendary lords of the Warriors of Chaos. So let's say, assuming you have the Champions of Chaos, DLC of course. But of course, if you own the Warriors of Chaos race pack, you can confederate Kokolek, you can confederate Sigvald, and you can always confederate Be'lakor. Now, here's the thing about this. So you take their settlement, and then you can forcefully confederate. And so you can end up in a campaign where you control all of the legendary lords of the Warriors of Chaos. You just need to get there. It's not a question of winning. It might not be as fast as some of the other campaigns on this list, but it's not a question of winning. It's a question of just how long it's going to take you. And then on top of that, Archaon is in such a position, he gets 25 souls per vassal, he gets a diplomatic relations benefit, he gets a research benefit, and he gets an extra maximum gifts of Chaos Undivided in his campaign, which is, by the way, Chaos Undivided is without a doubt the strongest. And he's undivided, so he has access to all of the gods. Now, there could be some benefits in having like multiple slots, maybe for Khorne and Nurgle, but there's not really benefits for Slaanesh and Tzeentch. Though having, you know, at least one slot is always great. Point is, so Archaon gets access to all of the gifts for all of the Warriors of Chaos. He gets access to all of the units in the entire roster, so you can upgrade to, like, say for instance, you can go like once you unlock like the brand of Khorne, the various brands, you can get all of the types of units. So you can get you can get the most durable infantry, the best cavalry, all that kind of stuff in your campaign as Archaon. And because of you're constantly getting souls in the campaign, it means you can also get like a lot of the great units through the souls mechanic. You can get a lot of Dragon and Gorshagovs. You can get a lot of Hell Cannon. So that's like the default army of the Warriors of Chaos is already very, very strong. But you can make it far stronger if you're playing, if you're constantly getting souls, because constantly getting souls from vassals means that one of the things you can do is constantly activate gifts to get more units. So basically, like, let's say, you know, I had the Hail of Hellfire over here unlocked, then I could activate it one turn and then switch to another gift to say, like, let's say I would activate the Dragon Ogre Shagoffs, and then I would reactivate the Hell Cannons. I would just be ping-ponging between the two of them if I had enough souls for it. And because I'm getting that souls benefit, it ends up being ridiculous. The diplomatic and research benefit, well, the research benefit, to be honest, is not really too important because you can get a huge amount of research rate anyway as the Warriors of Chaos. But the diplomatic relations means that all of the Chaos factions, the more vassals you have, the stronger you will be. So you end up in this situation is like the more you get, the stronger you are going to be diplomatically. So that's going to make vassalization of factions or diplomatic engagements with factions far likelier to happen, because like just with 2 vassals, you're looking at 20 diplomatic relations with the chaos factions. And then, like, getting free vassals, like, I could get Barasursus, I could get this minor faction of Khorne, I could get the Mag of Kin. That would just end up being, like early on, you're looking at the plus 50 diplomatic relations. That's the reason Archaon is so very, very strong. The Confederation aspect, the Undivided aspect, and also the diplomacy aspect. Of course, if you want a campaign where you get access to stuff earlier, you can always play Be'lakor. But Archaon, while he is slower in terms of his campaign progress in every way, shape, or form than Be'lakor, he ends up being substantially stronger for it. The demonic army unit situation, not necessarily so, but the demonic units, like, with the exception like Exalted Bloodletters, it doesn't really matter. Because the humanoid units, the mortal followers of Chaos, are the stronger units in general, with a couple of exceptions, but those exceptions don't include like Exalted Demonettes or anything like that. Also, like, Archaon does have free quest items that you can get over here in his campaign. So there's a good amount of power he can gain from that. Also money he can gain from that. And he ends up in this situation where it's just impossible, really, to lose the campaign. And once you get going, like, you can dominate the map. Like, some of the things that you can do in a campaign as Archaon are just absurd. And that is it. Costin signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.